We're dropping week one's biggest fantasy football reactions, takeaways, and all of the breaking news you need to catch up on week one and get you ready to dominate week two. Theo Greminger, Fantasy Football Daily on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network. We're about to get it going.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Week one is tilting. It's always tilting. Every year, week one catches up with us. We get excited for it. We prepare for it all summer long. And then we start to tilt. It's Sunday morning. We're setting lineups. We're checking injury reports. We're reacting. And then the games tip off, and it's like nothing else. Fantasy football is back, and we've got you covered here at Fantasy Points to help you crush all of your leagues this season. Fantasy Football Daily is dropping multiple episodes a week. Make sure you come back early in the week for the waiver wire show with Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley and myself. Make sure you're also checking out the Start Sit show. I'm going to be recording with Graham Barfield this week as well, and every week moving forward. And make sure you're also tuning into School of Scott, where Scott Barrett and I get you ready for the week ahead, give you some of the biggest things you need to know to crush your fantasy leagues every single week, and Dynasty Life for you Dynasty managers. Let's get it going, though. And speaking of Dynasty managers, rookie tight ends continue to thrive in fantasy football. Year in, year out, it seems like a positive trend. We saw last year Brock Bowers set the record, set new bars for what a rookie tight end was capable of performing in fantasy football. Bowers was unbelievable last year. He broke Puka Nakua's record for receptions and sort of moved the bar even higher. This past year, we saw NFL teams pushing tight ends up in the first round of the NFL draft. And it looks like it's going to be another year where rookie tight ends help us out in redraft as well. We had something historical happen on Sunday. Both Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin Jr. both tied for the record for the most receptions by a rookie tight end in the NFL opener with 7 each. Tyler Warren is everything we thought he was. Warren had 7 catches for 76 yards, 9 targets. The Colts completely dominated Miami, and Tyler Warren led the Colts in targets, which was very, very significant. Josh Downs only had 3 targets. So a lot of the summer was spent with a lot of people sort of steaming Josh Downs up. They talked about him being the beneficiary for the Daniel Jones takeover at quarterback. Certainly was not that in week one. It was pretty much all Tyler Warren. 7 catches for 76 yards. He had a 21-yard reception. He also was given a manufactured rush attempt. He only had 3 yards on it, but that is actually in the bag for Indianapolis. So Warren, you were drafting him highly. I was in Vegas for the FFPC, NFFC drafts, and we saw Warren going off the board alongside guys like Sam Laporta, and people were absolutely steaming him up. But Warren was not the only tight end to put up very, very impressive numbers today. We got to talk about Harold Fannin Jr. And right here on this channel, if you're watching this on Fantasy Points YouTube, if you were listening to the Fantasy Football Daily podcast, I was joined by Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley last week, where we did our preseason, pre-week one waiver wire show, and we told you to pick up Harold Fannin Jr. This was our recommended tight end, the one that we said you should be picking up before the season starts, because we didn't want you to have to deal with this. Now you're going to have to deal with Harold Fannin Jr., and you're going to have to bid on him with the rest of your league mates. Fannin was awesome. He ended up with 9 targets. David Njoku was not invisible, but David Njoku only had 6 targets. Fannin Jr. had 9 targets to Njoku's 6. Fannin Jr. also had that early first quarter rush attempt. So much like Warren, they got a chance to put the ball in his hands as well. Fannin's a thing. Let's not get it twisted. Fannin led Cleveland in targets. He ended up with 9 targets. He out-targeted Jerry Jeudy. He out-targeted David Njoku. He out-targeted Dylan Sampson, who was really, really good in the passing game role. Dylan Sampson ended up with 8 targets and 8 catches, caught all of them. But Fannin Jr., we talked about him. Not only does he have this immediate role in the offense, but there is the contingent upside factor where there's just not a whole lot in Cleveland. There's David Njoku, there's Jerry Jeudy, there's Cedric Tillman, who had 8 targets as well. But Fannin Jr. has been fast-tracked by this coaching staff. Fannin Jr. is absolutely here to stay. I think you've got to move him ahead of David Njoku for the rest of the season rankings. I really feel like that's sort of the way it's going, where this takeover could be rapid and ascending. The next big takeaway is the Brock Bowers injury watch. Now, let's talk about Brock Bowers, because Brock Bowers was actually outsnapped by Michael Mayer. And Brock Bowers, the usage was interesting, where you saw last year Bowers playing like this full-time role. Bowers today, there was some times where he wasn't on the field. They weren't using him in multiple personnel sets and in favor of Michael Mayer as a blocker. So this was a little bit tilting. Now, it didn't really matter for the bottom line, because Brock Bowers is Brock Bowers, and Bowers went nuts. Brock Bowers ended up just being his usual dominant self, ended up with a 38-yard reception, had 8 targets, caught 5 of them, but had 103 receiving yards. So the bottom line looks pretty good. But this whole Brock Bowers can break fantasy this year. Brock Bowers can give you sort of a argument to be the 101 in 2026. That narrative will not be there if the snap share is similar to what we saw today. If he's playing sort of a quasi high level snap share, but not a full-time snap share in this offense, it's going to limit his ceiling. Now, Michael Mayer, this coaching staff seems to like, but he's certainly not a threat on the level of Brock Bowers. Jacoby Myers was good against his old team. Now, this could be just a game plan specific, where they're playing New England. Maybe this was the game plan, but you definitely don't like to see it in week 1. Bowers is able to overcome it. He can actually still be the tight end 1 overall, but where he was being drafted, the narrative is Bowers should give you like top 3 wide receiver production. So if he's simply the tight end 1, but he only outscores the tight end 2 by like 2 points per game, then where you were taking him in drafts was probably the incorrect move, considering some of the running backs and wide receivers you were taking him ahead of. Now we're also going to pay attention to this Brock Bowers knee injury, where it's a little bit questionable, where we don't have the full story. I'm recording this on Sunday evening, so hopefully we'll have a little more clarity on Monday. Brock Bowers came out and said, this is nothing. This is nothing that's bothering me. This is nothing serious. But we don't like seeing a guy have to go in the blue medical tent. We don't like hearing about a knee injury. So we'll assume that this isn't a whole lot. But if you're trying to get ahead of the situation, put a couple early waivers in, especially in tight end premium leagues. Michael Mayer needs to get rostered everywhere if you're playing tight end premium, just in case it's maybe a 1-week absence for Bowers. But by his quotes, it doesn't sound like he thinks that's going to be the case. So keep an eye on this one, both the usage and the potential injury for Brock Bowers. But absolutely a baller. And speaking of ballers, we got to talk about the New York Jets. And I live on Long Island, and there was a lot of Jets fans sort of cautiously optimistic about today's game and also this Jets offense in general. And I got to say that the Jets lost, but I think that the Jets fans won for the season, because this was a tough Pittsburgh Steelers team, comes into New York, wins the game in MetLife. But the positivity we saw for Aaron Glenn's first game, Tanner Engstrand's first game, Justin Fields' first game behind center, there was a ton of positivity with this offense. And this offense was really pretty awesome today. I mean, you're talking about 400 total yards, and anybody who watched the beginning of last season saw just how much this Jets team was struggling. For them to come out with a 400 total yard game against what's considered to be one of the best defenses in football in Pittsburgh, that was telling. The RPO system with Tanner Engstrand is also telling, and the aggressive nature of this Jets offense reminds me a little bit of what we saw with Ben Johnson in Detroit last year. They are very aggressive as an offense. They're also highly consolidated, and we love this for fantasy football. Garrett Wilson had 9 of the Jets' 21 targets himself. Wilson was awesome, caught a touchdown pass. The locker room narrative with him and Justin Fields is very strong right now. Wilson, again, 9 of the Jets' 21 targets. On multiple podcasts this offseason, I talked about this with Scott Barrett. I talked about this with Brett Whitefield, Joe Dolan. Pretty much everybody we talk Jets with on the Fantasy Points channel was kind of agreeing with this, that Garrett Wilson has a chance to lead the NFL in target share. Now, he's not going to lead the NFL in targets because the Jets are not going to be a high-volume pass attack. This was a very tight game, and not a high-volume pass attack, but the rushing game really, really good. Huge positive result for Breece Hall managers. Breece Hall was falling into round 5 a lot in these late drafts. Looked fantastic. Breece Hall had 2 catches for 38 yards, had 4 targets. He was the second leading target earner on the Jets, but it was really the rushes where Breece Hall looked just fantastic. Averaged 5.6 yards per carry, had 107 rushing yards, and he had 19 total carries. Braylon Allen only had 6 total carries. Now, Braylon Allen did have a rushing touchdown where he looked like a monster on it, but that was sort of few and far between. It was all Breece Hall. So I've been singing the praises of Braylon Allen all offseason long. I still think in this offense that's run heavy, he is a really, really strong contingent upside handcuff. But that really looks like it's going to be about that because it looks like the Breece Hall show with a ton of Garrett Wilson. And the other big winner, Justin Fields. Justin Fields had 2 rushing touchdowns, 48 rushing yards on the ground. When we talk about Fields, Fields has one of the highest rushing yard total seasons in NFL history at the quarterback position. Showed that again today with nearly 50 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns to go along with his passing touchdowns. So I'm very optimistic on this Jets offense. 32 points scored, nearly knocked off Pittsburgh at home. Now, Jets fans don't want to hear this because this was a game where they should have won. They had every chance to win. But the Jets are absolutely a live team next week against Buffalo. Then they have a couple of games that are going to be interesting ones on the road in Tampa, on the road in Miami. Then Dallas comes into New York, into MetLife at the beginning of October. I think this Jets team is going to get better as the season moves along. I think if you're a Jets fan, you should be happy. And if you are a fantasy football manager with Justin Fields, Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson, you should be really, really happy. Another quarterback who looks like he is an absolute fantasy steal right now is Justin Herbert. And of course, we're going back to Friday on this one. During the fantasy football season, talking about something that happened 3 days before, it might as well be like a month before. We've sort of moved on to the next one and had a chance to unpack this game. And there's so much we could talk about here. We could talk about the Xavier Worthy injury. We could talk about the lack of a key running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. We could talk about Hollywood Brown. But I'm going to choose to talk about Justin Herbert and just how good he looked. Herbert became only the 3rd LA Chargers quarterback in history to have a opening NFL game of the season with 300 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes. He was electric. And what you paid for Justin Herbert in ADP this year did not really, like, what we saw on the field versus what you paid at ADP. An absolute steal is what Justin Herbert's looking like. And a lot of this offseason, we were sort of poking holes and saying, just how good could he be in a Greg Roman offense that's going to be very, very run heavy? Now, the Chargers did have 25 rush attempts, but Justin Herbert also had 34 pass attempts. So they come out the gate really looking to pass the ball all over the field. Quentin Johnston had 2 touchdown grabs. He played very, very well. Ladd McConkey was really, really popping on our average separation score on fantasy points data. But McConkey only had 6 catches for 74 yards. Really, the story was Keenan Allen is fully back. 7 catches, 68 yards, had a touchdown, and he led LA with 10 targets. So Justin Herbert really has a trio of wide receivers that he seems very comfortable with. Omarion Hampton, bottom line, was not there, but Hampton looked very strong as a runner. This LA offense could end up being the offense that we sort of mispriced in fantasy. And when I say mispriced, I'm not talking about Ladd McConkey, but I'm talking about Justin Herbert could absolutely be a steal. Keenan Allen could be a steal. Quentin Johnston's going to get picked up on waiver wires this week. This was a really, really fun one. And then you add to it Justin Herbert's willingness to run the football. He had 7 carries for 32 yards. If you see Justin Herbert with 5 rush attempts every single game, his fantasy floor is going to be really, really high. I'm very into this Chargers team. I think they are a fun one to watch, not only in week 2, but for the season moving forward. Huge hurdle for them to beat Kansas City right out of the gate. Got to talk about Daniel Jones, though. So we mentioned, there's week 1. Week 1's always tilting. It's sort of a new thing is here. But we oftentimes find parallels to what was going on last season. And when we start talking about Daniel Jones, we have to start looking at the trend, the fantasy football trend, because these things, like we talked about with Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin, how we had Brock Bowers last year, Sam Laporta the year before, how it's been now 3 straight years with these rookie tight ends coming right out the gate, firing away, giving us fantasy production. It's also these left for dead reclamation project quarterbacks who have finished as QB1s in consecutive seasons. Go back to 2023, Baker Mayfield goes to Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield was sort of looked at as like a stopgap quarterback. Tom Brady's gone. Let's bring in Baker, and eventually we'll bring in a different quarterback to replace him. Problem is, Baker just played his way into a long-term contract. Baker was a QB1 in 2023, finished as a low-end QB1, then last year passed for over 40 touchdown passes, sort of settled in, and was a top 5 scorer at the quarterback position last year. Then fast forward to 2024, Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was sort of a left for dead for years type guy, goes to Minnesota, takes advantage of a J.J. McCarthy injury, and Sam Darnold ends up finishing as one of the leading passers in the NFL, was a low-end QB1. Now, who could that player be in 2025? I think it's going to be Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones was absolutely cooking today. Miami sort of coughed it up a lot. Miami had no chance to win this game. But Daniel Jones showed exactly why we were sort of cautiously optimistic about him being this year's Darnold. And we talked about it this offseason. He, of course, had to beat out Anthony Richardson, but he did that. And the Colts didn't make it out to be like some crazy, let's flip back and forth, let's give multiple QBs chances throughout the year. It sounds like Daniel Jones is going to get a very, very long leash to just hold on to this starting quarterback job and take Indianapolis to the playoffs. Great start for him today. 22 of 29 as a passer, has a passing touchdown, connects with Michael Pittman. We talked about how Tyler Warren was there. Tyler Warren with a really, really fun debut. Jonathan Taylor even had 3 catches. And the running game, Taylor, DJ Giddens together had 30 rush attempts. Giddens looks like he's going to be a fun handcuff. Taylor is Jonathan Taylor. But Daniel Jones has mobility as a runner. Daniel Jones had 2 rushing scores, much like Justin Fields. Jones punches it in twice, has a passing touchdown, ends up with 3 touchdowns, no interceptions that he threw away, and Michael Pittman looks sort of rejuvenated with him. Indianapolis has a top-notch offensive line. Indianapolis has a ton of skill position talent, and Daniel Jones is in a situation where I think he's going to really, really defy expectations and have a pretty solid season. Now, do I think he's a league winner? Absolutely not. But I think at the very least, he's going to be in the streaming discussion when we start getting to ugly bye weeks. So if you don't like your QB2 situation, consider Daniel Jones. He's going to be in my waiver wire article over on Fantasy Points. And if you want to read my waiver article, you want to read our start sit articles, our fantastic projections, all of our amazing tools we have over at Fantasy Points. If you want to make your Sundays better and win some money this season in fantasy football, win some titles, get a Fantasy Points subscription. You're not going to regret it. And you can use the code Theo, just the word Theo, and that's going to get you 15% off any Fantasy Points subscription. Go check it out at fantasypoints.com. We talked about the rookie when we talked about Tyler Warren. Let's talk about Emeka Egbuka season. And Emeka Egbuka is one that steamed up big time. We talked about him, it seems like, for the last 8 weeks. It's been just constant talk about Emeka Egbuka and his chance to have a big season right out of the gate. And what a debut for him. Just a fantastic debut performance. Egbuka ends up with 2 touchdown grabs. Just fantastic. 2 touchdown grabs, ends up with the big go-ahead touchdown in the 4th quarter. Egbuka looks just completely locked in. Only 4 catches, but this was a hard-fought game on the road in Atlanta. Tampa Bay wins it. Baker Mayfield, again, was slinging 3 touchdown passes, but Egbuka with 2 of them. What a debut for Emeka Egbuka. And I think things are going to get even better for him. Chris Godwin can come back, but for me, it's Egbuka is just going to establish himself as a player that's going to give you wide receiver 2 numbers with spike weeks like we saw this week. They play Houston next week. Then they have the Jets in Tampa, and that big one in week 4 that I know that Tampa Bay fans are circling on their schedules. Philadelphia comes into Tampa Bay. That's at the end of September. I think by the time we get there, Egbuka is just going to be absolutely cooking. Now, we talked about a young wide receiver in Egbuka, And we got to talk about the Washington Commanders. And I think that everybody's going to be like, Theo, here comes the victory lap for you telling us to pick up Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. But I'm not going to do that, guys, because the real ones that have been watching this YouTube channel and listening to this podcast all summer long, your bags are packed in round 18. Your bags are packed in the 5th round of Dynasty rookie drafts when it comes to Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I'll talk about that with Scott Barrett on School of Scott this week. But my big takeaway from the Washington game, I mean, really, how about a Commanders defense looks fantastic? How about the Commanders expect to win games? This is a team that really views themselves as a true contender after making it to the NFC Championship game last year. But the big takeaway for me is Deebo Samuel. And there was a lot of Deebo haters out there. Deebo was a player that Scott Barrett and I drafted on a couple of teams. We talked about him as a player we were like very optimistic about. And it was not a whole lot of fantasy analysts sort of pounding the table for that. But Deebo, the drum beats were positive for him throughout the entire offseason. The Washington Commanders wanted to get an upgrade at the wide receiver 2 position. They wanted to add a player capable of giving them yak yards, and they found this sort of perfect fit in Deebo. And I think the fantasy community sort of left him for dead after the regression we saw in San Francisco last year. But the Washington beat reporters, the coach speak, even Deebo himself, there was just a lot of positivity this offseason. And we saw it right out the gate where Terry McLaurin only had 4 targets, caught 2 of them. Obviously, the ramp-up period for him will have to be a little bit longer than anticipated. Missed a ton of training camp with that holdout situation. But Deebo was just awesome. Led Washington with 10 targets. And 10 targets for Deebo. We're not used to seeing Deebo get too many double-digit target games. I mean, you see the one-off situations in San Francisco, but this is a player that has always thrived on being very, very efficient and explosive, not necessarily high-volume target guy. So 10 targets out the gate, a huge win for Deebo Samuel. Catches 7 for 77 yards. And then the fun one gets you a 19-yard rushing touchdown where they talked about Deebo being used as a runner. Obviously, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Jaden Daniels himself, Austin Eckler, sort of in this like weird little mix. Jeremy McNichols also getting touches. But Deebo, I think that's going to be something that we can predict, that you're going to see rushing attempts for him moving forward week in, week out, plus the targets in the passing game. Deebo looks really, really good. I think this week we have to start considering him being a low-end wide receiver 2, sort of moving forward. Drafted as a wide receiver 4, low-end wide receiver 3, I think he's going to really separate from where his ADP was. Now, of course, a little bit older, could break down, but as long as we've got Deebo, I think Deebo's going to put up numbers in this offense. Just a ton of positive vibes for him. Usage was really, really strong for him. Make sure you're checking out Fantasy Points data for the best usage. All of anything analytical you want to find out, Fantasy Points data is the best in the business. Again, use the code Theo, and you're going to get 15% off any Fantasy Points sub. We've got to talk about bounce backs at the running back position. We just talked about a big bounce back with Deebo Samuel. I think that another running back that we've got to really, really adjust our preseason expectations for is Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne and also Javonte Williams. Let's start out with Etienne. Etienne, huge disappointment last season in Jacksonville, was outproduced by Tank Bigsby on the ground. A lot of people sort of said Etienne could get traded this offseason. Not only does he not get traded during the offseason, but it looks like he's going to be a massive part of the Jacksonville offense. Dominates running back touches in the backfield. Ends up with 16 carries. Bigsby only has 5 carries. Bashal Tutin only had 3. And Travis Etienne also had 3 targets in the passing game. Bashal Tutin had 0 targets in the passing game. Tank Bigsby had 0 targets in the passing game. So he dominates running back targets, dominates running back rush attempts, and ends up going absolutely nuts as a runner. Has a 71-yard rush attempt to give his bottom line a 16-carry, 143-yard performance. Jacksonville completely dominated Carolina. The battle of the Tampa Bay offensive coordinators, huge win there for Liam Cohen, but we've got to really update our expectations for Travis Etienne moving forward. Really some positivity there. And we got to talk about it. Again, you saw this game days ago. You're like, why are we talking about this? Because Javonte Williams dominated running back touches in the Dallas backfield. Dallas, of course, loses a very, very tough one to Philadelphia. They lose 24-20. CeeDee Lamb dropped 2 big ones on the final drive, but CeeDee Lamb was CeeDee Lamb. 7 catches, 110 yards, 13 targets, absolute machine. The story is Javonte Williams, though. Jaden Blue, who was a popular sleeper where a lot of the fantasy community was sort of pushing him up during the offseason as a sleeper in that backfield, he ends up being inactive. Javonte ends up with 15 carries, ends up with only 54 yards on the ground. So again, sub 4 yards per carry, but he does fall in the end zone twice. Javonte also catches 2 passes out of the backfield. They're using like Kavonte Turpin, a wide receiver, on some of those backfield targets. But Javonte Williams, just based on the volume, we have to adjust. We have to move him up in the ranks. Miles Sanders had a costly fumble. Miles Sanders had that one long 49-yard run. But is it wrong to say that that was sort of an indictment against him because he got caught from behind and did not look explosive? No, I can't hate on a guy for getting a 49-yard run. But if that was Jaden Blue or even Javonte Williams, I think that goes to the house right there. So is Javonte Williams as explosive as we saw when he was a young player in Denver? Absolutely not. But he's in a situation now where he's going to get volume and usage in what should be a good offense moving forward. Dak Prescott looked good. Brighter days are ahead for these Dallas Cowboys. And I think Javonte Williams is one we need to move up. Got to talk about promising consolidation of targets. And really 2 teams sort of stand out for me. We often talk about this with using fantasy points data, looking at the target shares, looking at how teammates and teams are utilizing their best weapons. We love teams that are highly, highly consolidated. And 2 teams that are sort of standing out here are the Arizona Cardinals and the Atlanta Falcons. Arizona, all offseason long, we saw Trey McBride drafted as the tight end 2 overall. Marvin Harrison Jr., though, was the tilting one. Some people saw him as a massive edge pick, get him at the beginning of the 4th round after taking him at the 1-2 turn last year, after that somewhat disappointing rookie season. Looked like they had a plan for Harrison Jr. Harrison Jr. looked very, very good. Again, the raw target total for Harrison Jr., not like exceptional, but he was very, very efficient. Had 5 catches on 6 targets in a game where Arizona controlled and won. Harrison Jr. also catches a touchdown pass. So his bottom line, excellent right out the gate. And Trey McBride ends up with 9 targets, catches 6 of them. So the Arizona Cardinals basically gave 50% of their total targets to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. They had 15 of the Cardinals' 29 pass attempts. I mean, if this sort of consolidation of targets stays static and is that sort of like that for the year, then I think it's looking like Trey McBride is going to reward fantasy managers who drafted him very highly at the tight end spot. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is certainly going to beat his ADP expectation at the wide receiver spot with this sort of target share. Now, I think the passing volume for Arizona is going to move up as we move along. Again, the Saints are one of the worst teams in the league, but I think we could see a really strong game out of Harrison Jr. and also Trey McBride next week against a soft Carolina Panthers defense coming into Arizona. So Arizona gets their home opener next week, a chance to go 2-0, and I think we're going to see a lot of both Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. Keep an eye on that consolidated target share. Another team who lost today, but the consolidation of targets, very, very strong. Talking about the Atlanta Falcons and my guy, Drake London, and also Bijan Robinson, both of these players, you've got to feel great about where they're at in the passing game. No Darnell Mooney, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Of course, Mooney's out this week, which sort of leveled everybody's targets up a little bit. Kyle Pitts even had 8 targets. Pitts was fine. 7 catches, 59 yards. Good start to the season for him. But really the story was Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson scores on a 50-yard touchdown catch and run early on in the first quarter. Just an eye-opening, explosive play from Bijan. As a runner, Bijan only out-carried Tyler Algier 12-10. But if his passing game work is going to be similar to what we saw this week, then Bijan is going to challenge for that RB1 overall spot. Ends up with 6 catches for 100 yards on 7 targets. But the story really was Drake London. And Drake London had a near touchdown catch to end the game which would have sort of changed this narrative. But Drake London ends up with 8 catches for 55 yards, ends up with 15 targets. So Bijan and Drake London combine for 22 of the Atlanta Falcons' 42 targets. So very highly consolidated. Michael Penix basically hyper-targeted those two players and Kyle Pitts. Look for this to continue. Atlanta, I think, is going to be a fun team for us in fantasy because they're going to be very easy to predict, and they have 2 players who can finish top 5 at their position in scoring in Bijan Robinson and, of course, Drake London. Keep an eye on that consolidated touch share. And really, probably the biggest takeaway of the day was Christian McCaffrey. He is who we thought he was. And this is pre like little bit of injury news gets out. We all panic. I, of course, panic. Everybody's panicking. We're taking Brian Robinson earlier in late drafts. I was talking about Isaac Orendo as a potential waiver wire stash. Christian McCaffrey used the word calf injury comes out, where Christian McCaffrey's calf injury set fantasy football sort of in a massive panic attack for a few-day period. But it looks like that was way, way overblown. And anybody who got Christian McCaffrey at a discount could be holding the RB1 overall. McCaffrey was just awesome. San Francisco ends up getting an important win on the road in Seattle, a hard-fought win, 17-13. And players are dropping right and left for San Francisco. We saw George Kittle. He has a hamstring injury. Juwan Jennings might miss some time. Just multiple San Francisco 49ers getting banged up. Seems like year in, year out. Brandon Ayuk is already injured to start the year. Ricky Pearsall was good. He could be the story we talk about here. Pearsall had 4 catches for 108 yards, showed that explosiveness, that athleticism that we were kind of talking about all summer long here at Fantasy Points. But really, it's Christian McCaffrey. The story of the day was Christian McCaffrey and a vintage Christian McCaffrey day as a receiver. And I don't want to say forget the rushing yards, but for me, it's McCaffrey getting 10 targets, 9 catches out of the backfield. Whether this was because George Kittle left the game early or not, it's still a massive positive sign. And Deebo Samuel being in Washington, them getting Christian McCaffrey the ball out of the backfield, that replacing a little bit of that yards after the catch ability that Deebo brought to the table, replacing that getting the ball around the line of scrimmage and letting a player cook ability that Deebo had there, and just giving it to Christian McCaffrey, where McCaffrey with 10 targets, 9 catches, has 73 receiving yards. And then on top of that, in a hard-fought game, ends up with 22 carries. So if they were worried about Christian McCaffrey, you would have seen a lot more Brian Robinson. Now, Brian Robinson still worked in. Robinson had a catch. He had 9 carries, so was not invisible. But Christian McCaffrey more than out-carried him 2-1. Now, the rushing yards weren't there. It was only 3.1 yards per carry, but I think that'll trend up. It's the 22 rush attempts for Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, absolutely an incredible way for him to start the year. A couple of bonus takeaways. Dropped 10 of them already. Let's drop a couple more. Did we draft the wrong Seattle Seahawk back early? Zach Charbonnet outgains and outcarries Kenneth Walker. 12 carries for Zach Charbonnet to only 10 for Kenneth Walker. Zach Charbonnet finds the end zone as a runner. Now, Kenneth Walker did have 3 targets to Zach Charbonnet's 0, but we know that Zach Charbonnet has it in his bag to be a receiver out of the backfield as well, a very capable receiver. So this is a telling one. Charbonnet was really a high-level performer throughout training camp in Seattle, and for him to come out with this, like last year with Ryan Grubb, the Zach Charbonnet games were when Kenneth Walker was out, Zach Charbonnet would cook. Now it's kind of flipped the script where it looks like this could be a true split with two really good running backs. And yeah, I said 2 really good running backs because I think Zach Charbonnet, a very good running back, last year had 3 top 8 finishes, weekly finishes at the running back spot. And Zach Charbonnet looks like he could end up being an ADP win at the position. Kenneth Walker, though, a lot of managers taking Kenneth Walker inside of round 3 might like to get their money back if this is something that's static. Now, could this be a load management thing for Kenneth Walker where he missed all that time in training camp and maybe they're going to ramp him up? Could be. We could see that in the next couple weeks. But the way that it looked today is it looked like sort of a split backfield with two running backs that they're very, very enthusiastic about in Charbonnet and Walker. And these are two players that were both second-round picks and both had success last year. Kenneth Walker, of course, averaged over 16 points per game last year. Charbonnet had really, really strong whenever he had an opportunity to start. So this looks like a strength of Seattle and something they're going to lean into. Very, very tilting one. If you're holding bags of Zach Charbonnet, you feel like you got an ADP steal. If you're holding bags of Kenneth Walker, you are extremely nervous. It might get to the point where he's not usable in fantasy. And looking at this Seattle Seahawks schedule, it doesn't get easier here. At Pittsburgh next week is about as tilting as it gets. Team going from the West Coast to the East Coast to play I know they just gave up 32 points to New York, but a pretty tough Pittsburgh defense in Pittsburgh. Then the really tilting one is going to happen in week 3, where one of these two running backs could put up a very big game against New Orleans in week 3 in Seattle. So these next 2 weeks are going to tell us a lot about this usage in the Seattle backfield. Kenneth Walker managers and Zach Charbonnet managers, very, very excited to see these ones. And it's going to be very, very tilting for Kenneth Walker managers if this usage stays the same week in, week out. Now, Charbonnet, of course, capped by Walker, but if he's getting that goal line usage where he's going to get the rushing scores, Charbonnet, I think, is going to end up beating his ADP regardless. And Kenneth Walker, those 3 catches, not enough here to really propel him if he's going to concede this much of rushing usage to Charbonnet. So we want to keep a big eye on that one. And then I got to finish it out. We've got to talk about Josh Jacobs and the dominant performance of the Green Bay Packers. And it's really just Jacobs in Green Bay continues to find the end zone. And it just continued from last year to this season. This is now 9 straight with Josh Jacobs finding the end zone dating back to last year's regular season. Jacobs wasn't great today. Had only 3.5 yards per carry, 19 carries though, 66 rushing yards, but he gets that rushing score. And this was a hard-fought, dominant, physical win for the Green Bay Packers. Jaden Reed plays. We thought he was going to miss. He catches a touchdown pass. You see Jordan Love end up with 0 interceptions after having that horrible game last year when Green Bay got eliminated by Philly. Jordan Love, tighter with the football, ends up with 2 passing touchdowns. One goes to Jaden Reed, one goes to Tucker Kraft. But it's really Josh Jacobs is the identity of this team. 19 carries, 66 yards. But Jacobs finds the end zone. And it's just everything sort of revolves around Josh Jacobs. It's a physical offense, and Josh Jacobs is the hammer in that offense, finds the end zone. We're gonna point him out every week on this show until he doesn't score. 9 straight regular season games with a rushing score. Gotta love seeing it out of Jacobs. We could talk about a million other things, but you're gonna have to tune back in all week long right here on Fantasy Points YouTube, Fantasy Football Daily Podcast. Make sure you're subscribing to Fantasy Football Daily Podcast if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you are watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast as well. I have bonus episodes that only go out as podcasts sometimes. Also, make sure you're tuning in for School of Scott Barrett and I every single week. That show is a great one for you to listen to as a pod or watch on Fantasy Points YouTube. We're everywhere. And make sure you're checking out Dynasty Life, my Dynasty show, every single week on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network. Subscribe to it wherever you get your pods, and we're going to see you soon.